Murder suspect dies in custody amid Rikers scrutiny. The death of Jimmy Avila. Three people shot in a Bronx backyard feud. A suspect arrested in a storm of violence. And then, before a trial could even begin, he was found dead inside one of the most notorious jails in America. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the death of Jimmy Avila and what it reveals about Rikers Island, the Bronx, and a justice system haunted by its own failures. It began as so many tragedies do, with something small: a disagreement, raised voices, a long-standing tension in a Bronx neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. On that summer evening, Jimmy Avila, 44 years old, confronted his neighbors during a backyard gathering. Accounts differ on what sparked the fight. Some say it was noise, others mention disrespect, alcohol, or unresolved grudges. But what's clear is this: the argument spiraled into chaos. Avila, described by witnesses as increasingly erratic, allegedly pulled out a gun. In the sudden eruption of violence, three people were shot. Screams echoed down the block. Neighbors dove for cover. Families rushed terrified children inside. Within moments, a community backyard had turned into a crime scene. The victims were rushed to the hospital. They survived, but their lives, and the life of the neighborhood, would never be the same. And as sirens wailed through the Bronx, police began the manhunt for the shooter. The suspect's name spread quickly: Jimmy Avila. He was arrested not long after the shooting, taken into custody without the kind of extended chase that often follows such crimes. But police immediately described him as agitated, unstable, and prone to outbursts. Court documents and police records began to paint a picture of a man with a long history of problems. Avila had previous run-ins with the law. Neighbors described him as unpredictable, sometimes angry, sometimes withdrawn. Family members revealed he had struggled with mental health issues for years, and questions soon swirled. Was he medicated? Was he ever properly treated? Or was he a man left adrift until something snapped? But for prosecutors, none of that changed the charges. They had three shooting victims and witnesses pointing to Avila as the man behind the gun. He was headed for trial. Instead, he was headed to Rikers Island. For those outside New York, Rikers Island is more than just a jail, it is a symbol. The massive jail complex, sitting on a 400-acre island in the East River, has been called everything from a torture chamber to America's most notorious jail. Inside its walls, conditions are infamous: overcrowding, with cells packed beyond capacity; violence, with daily reports of stabbings, beatings, and gang attacks; neglect, where detainees often go without food, medical care, or basic sanitation; suicides and suspicious deaths, so common that human rights groups have demanded the facility be shut down. Rikers isn't a prison. It's not where people serve long sentences. It's a jail for detainees awaiting trial or serving short terms. That means the majority of people inside Rikers are not convicted of crimes at all. They're still legally innocent. And yet, for many, Rikers becomes a death sentence before they ever see a courtroom. Into this environment, Jimmy Avila was delivered. Who was Jimmy Avila before his name became a headline? He was a 44-year-old man from the Bronx, described by those who knew him as complex, troubled, and unpredictable. Some neighbors remembered him as quiet, keeping to himself. Others remembered shouting matches, bursts of anger, and long-standing disputes. Court records suggested a man with a violent streak, but also a man struggling with mental health. Reports point to a history of psychiatric issues, though details remain scarce. Was he ever diagnosed? Was treatment ever consistent? Or was he one of countless men in New York who slipped through the cracks of a broken system until something finally shattered? Avila's case was a tragedy of two dimensions. He was accused of inflicting violence on others, and yet he himself became the victim of a system that could not, or would not, keep him alive. Only days after being placed in Rikers, Avila was found dead in his cell. The Department of Correction offered only a bare statement: A 44-year-old detainee had been found unresponsive, the cause of death under investigation. But the silence raised more questions than answers. Was it natural causes, ignored until it was too late? Did Avila take his own life, overwhelmed by the charges and the brutal environment of Rikers? Or was it negligence, or worse, at the hands of those charged with guarding him? His death fit a grim pattern. Advocates noted that in recent years, dozens of inmates had died at Rikers, often in circumstances just as murky. Avila's death left behind two sets of grieving families. For the families of the three victims of the Bronx shooting, the news was bittersweet. Some expressed relief that the man accused of shooting their loved ones could never hurt anyone else. But others felt cheated. Justice had been denied. They would never hear his trial. They would never know his defense. There would never be a jury verdict to close the case. For Avila's own family, his death was devastating. They believed he needed help, not neglect. Why wasn't he monitored more closely, given his mental health history? Was his medication given on time? Did the city fail him? Both sets of families were united in one haunting reality. The justice system had left them without answers. Avila's death became another chapter in the long, brutal story of Rikers Island. In 2021 alone, 15 inmates died in custody, the highest in years. Detainees have described being locked in cells for days, denied medical treatment, and left in their own waste. Watchdog reports have documented over 400 stabbings and slashings in a single year. Federal investigations have called Rikers a place of inhumane and unconstitutional conditions. Some inmates have been found dead from overdoses, others from suicide, and still others under suspicious circumstances that remain unsolved. Every death inside Rikers chips away at public trust. Every unanswered question deepens the anger. And Avila's death, coming on the heels of so many others, became a symbol of a system collapsing under its own weight. The medical examiner launched an investigation into Avila's death. But as weeks passed, speculation filled the silence. Some insiders whispered that it was a heart condition that went untreated. Others suggested suicide, a man overwhelmed by guilt, fear, and the hopelessness of Rikers. But critics argue the exact cause almost doesn't matter, because whether it was suicide, medical neglect, or violence, it all points to one truth: the system failed. Avila's death forces us to confront a bigger question: what is justice? If a man accused of violent crimes dies before trial, is justice served? Or is it stolen from both the victims and the accused? If New York City cannot guarantee the basic safety of its detainees, what does that say about accountability? And if Rikers is a place where men and women die before their cases are ever heard, how can the public have faith in a justice system meant to protect them? A backyard argument turned into a triple shooting. A man accused of violence was locked away, awaiting trial. And then, before the courts could decide, he was gone dead in a Rikers cell. Was it fate? Neglect? Or the inevitable outcome of a system long known for breaking those trapped inside? One thing is certain: the death of Jimmy Avila is not just one man's story. It is the story of Rikers Island itself, a place where justice is promised, but too often denied. Thank you for watching. For more deep dives into cases where crime, justice, and systemic failure collide, subscribe to the channel True Crime Spectrum.